All right, does this look okay now? Ollie?
Yeah, looks good to go now.
Okay, very good. So anyway, I want to say thank you to Dr. Nick Zaptidis, who asked me to give this presentation. And so my name is Wes Ashford. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Neurotez, which I'm going to be acting as today in that capacity to talk for Nick about leptin. And otherwise, I'm a clinical professor affiliated at Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. A couple of email addresses can reach me. Let's have some websites. And the slides, if anybody's interested in following the slides separately or having access to them, the slides are posted at this website. And I'll show you this again at the end. And these are my disclosures. I hold shares in Neurotez, and I work with a company called Mem Trax, which basically is set up by my son, and which we applied for patent protection for this Memtrax test that I'll be presenting. I'm the chair of the Medical, Scientific, and Memory Screening Advisory Board for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, which provides the Memtrax test online. I'm a full-time VA employee, and the views I'm expressing do not represent the official views of VA. So I'm going to be talking about something from a little different perspective, although I guess everybody's talked about things from a little different perspective today. But I'm going to be talking about Alzheimer's disease. Of course, it's been a huge issue recently with the approval of this drug aducanumab for the treatment or slowing of the underlying process of Alzheimer's disease. So it's an interesting time because there's been just a flood of funding coming into the dementia field, trying to develop drugs, which is important, but it needs to be done carefully, which I'll discuss. So dementia, just by definition, is multiple cognitive deficits, mostly memory dysfunction, early new learning, usually with at least one additional cognitive deficit, and the deficits are severe enough to cause an impairment of social occupational functioning, and they represent a decline from the previous level. Alzheimer's disease, about 40% of dementia cases are pure Alzheimer's, and about 70% include Alzheimer's disease, or mixed. So the issue is mass screening and early detection. And what you can't detect, you can't treat. And I think a lot of the, in terms of talking about patient engagement, patient centricity, and artificial intelligence, and the excellent talk we heard on recruitment, I mean, this is what the issue is. Alzheimer's disease and dementia memory problems are very difficult to detect when they're mild, especially early Alzheimer's disease. And the problem is subtle, and mild cognitive impairment is the prodrome, and it can go on for years, 20, 30 years that Alzheimer's processes, we've shown are actually present before the first memory problems even are noticed. Family members avoid the problem, physicians miss it. About 90% of the time they miss it early. There's no efficient laboratory tests. And there are important accommodations that should be made if the patient is recognized as having such a problem. But you don't understand, you can't treat. We don't understand Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a cortical pathology that affects certain locations in the brain of high memory storage. And if you look at the correlation with the time index measure that I'll talk about in a minute, the areas of the brain that are affected are the areas that store the most information. These things here are called the temporal lobes in blue. And the primary cortex, somatosensory cortex, the speech-language cortex, the primary visual cortex are largely spared and unaffected in Alzheimer's disease. So it's a disease of the memory regions of the brain. It's not just a disease of synapses or amyloid or anything. It's a disease of memory mechanisms. Now, excuse me, I developed something called a time index model to look at the course of the disease. And you can take something that's been 1975 test I consider way out of date, it's still occasionally used, where you can actually look at the progression. So if 30 is a normal or a perfect score and 0 is, completely demented, and look at the time course. And right here is about where Alzheimer's disease is usually recognized. Beginning here called mild cognitive impairment, but it really has this long, slow slope down to this particular point. And at this point, it accelerates and goes over a course of 8 years before a person is totally demented, but usual life expectancy is about 10 years from the time a person is diagnosed. And we want to provide Memtrax, which we think can offer much higher precision. The Montreal Cognitive Assessment is widely used. It's related to the mini mental state exam, not exactly linear, but one of the points here is, see, the MoCA, by the time you get down to a mini mental state score of 10, your MoCA score is 2. So there's a lot of MoCA analysis here in the mild and early Alzheimer range, while the mini mental state is not showing any change here. So the MoCA is a very good test for screening for Alzheimer's disease. The mini mental state is a very poor test for screening for Alzheimer's disease, but when a person is moderate to severely demented, then it's better than the MoCA. You have to know exactly what it is that's going on. We have this thing called the Mem Trax test, and if you look at the MoCA versus time, you see that by the time a person gets, I should have put the 0 line here, by the time you get into here, it goes down very rapidly, and by the time you get to 5 years into the illness, the MoCA just gives you a score close to 0. Now, the Memtrax, similarly, but we can get, with Memtrax, when you get to about 4 years into the illness, it's not very useful either, because people start, so a perfect score would be 100%, and by the time you get below 65%, it's getting close to chance. And I'll describe this in a bit, but it has two components. It has the percent correct, which goes down over time. And by the time a person gets about 4 years into the illness, they can't do it at all. And there's a reaction time or response time involved also that goes up and progressively goes to basically infinity. But the MoCA scores correspond very closely to the Memtrax percent correct and to the response time. So I believe that we can use the Memtrax in place of the MoCA. And so Alzheimer cognitive pathology, just a quick primer on this, reflects failure of memory storage. And I'm going to show you something called item response analysis, also known as modern test theory, showing that if you look at the items on the mini mental state exam, you'll see here that knowing the date, the being able to recall apple, table, penny, which are the 3 memory items, all go down with, before a person is even at a point where they're getting to start recognizing being demented. So it is this area that we're trying to come up with early recognition for prevention purposes. And so this is really, it is in this area we need to focus, not over here where the mini mental state exam has most of its items. Alzheimer pathology is neuroplasticity. This is what Alzheimer's disease attacks. It's the focus of Alzheimer pathology. My mentor at UCLA, Arnold Scheibel, was first to mention this, and we published a paper on this in 1985. And this is basically what Alzheimer's disease is. It's a disease of neuroplasticity. And if you want to talk about large numbers, I can tell you there's 100 billion neurons in the brain, and they can fire in any order, which means that the brain has a potential firing capacity of 2 to the 100 billionth power, which is a good sized number. It's bigger than zettabyte. So we looked at Alzheimer's disease in terms of the plaques and the tangles. These would be the plaques, and these would be the tangles. And there's a tremendous amount of focus on getting rid of this amyloid. That's not the problem. The problem is that something in the processing of memory right here is causing the tau to hyperphosphorylate. And, in a normal neuron, we've been able to see that. What happens is these neurons degenerate, and then basically this tau pathology gets in here, and it basically amputates the neurons, loses all the synapses in the memory-rich regions, and then you lose your capacity to remember, and then you lose all your past memories. Now, we're interested in leptin as whether or not this might be a treatment. And it turns out that leptin is very much involved in some of the fundamental processes of Alzheimer's disease. And patients with mild cognitive impairment have, whether they're men, they have decreased leptin, and even women have decreased leptin relative to normals. So mild cognitive impairment men, mild cognitive impairment women have lower leptin levels. And we're thinking that that might be part of it. This is a complex slide. I'd be happy to talk with somebody about it later and go into depth. The basic concept of how the amyloid preprotein is cleaved by a beta secretase and a gamma secretase to form this green thing called beta amyloid, which does build up. But if you get an alpha secretase and cleave it right here in the middle, that doesn't occur. And I believe that this is something I call an AP switch, amyloid preprotein switch, where you either go down here to make new synapses, or go down here to remove old synapses. And given you've got the average number of synapses per neuron in the brain is 10,000, and the half-life of a synapse is in the order of 100 days. You have literally 1 billion synapses being destroyed and created every minute when you're learning. So it's a huge thing, but the apolipoprotein E, the genetic factor highly associated with Alzheimer's disease, also seems to benefit from things like statins and leptins. And the leptin also seems to be involved in exactly how the gamma secretase cleaves. So these are important issues in terms of stopping Alzheimer's disease. Not getting rid of beta amyloid. That is not the issue. The issue is to prevent this process from going wrong. What you can't measure, you can't treat. So we need better measurement systems for screening, for longitudinal assessment, and for outcome evaluation. And the major push by the National Institute of Aging has been to develop better systems. And for memory measurements, they detect CID, and we have Memtrax.com. And I believe, and this is related to earlier discussions, we need to develop an online registry, not just for heart rate, height, health, and tobacco smoking, but also for memory problems, for people who are at risk for dementia and Alzheimer's disease, so that we can monitor them over time and enroll them and recruit them for important studies in this area. So to screen and quantitate for Alzheimer's and therapy, we need rapid assessment of episodic memory function. And so episodic memory function is what is affected. There's lots of challenges, try to come up with proper assessment tools, test, retest, a whole variety of issues. Issues for memory testing. The current testing for memory problems is based on having a tester sit in front of a subject for a prolonged period of time, administering unpleasant tests. Tests have to be extensively and frequently administered. They have to be inexpensive. They have to be fun, so people will be willing to return for frequent visits. This is patient centricity. They need to be more precise, more reliable, more valuable to improve the sensitivity and specificity. And during the pandemic, it's essential to administer things at home. So the issues for measurement, Alzheimer's disease, problems, dementia, the buildup in plaques and tangles is just a sign of the underlying process. It is not what we need to control. We need to stop it. Dementia is related to synapse loss, but its loss is selectively affecting neuroplastic synapses. And we need accurate, relevant assessment of dementia, directly measuring episodic memory. The ideal screening test should be in a doctor's office, like a 6 vital sign. It should be computerized, should be on the World Wide Web, smartphones, as discussed with the Clone 360 that was talked about earlier. Kiosk administration, even in drugstores. There is a kiosk that's Piggy that's in drugstores. We've actually tried to get Mem Trax on, and they've used it. We need to have a brief, less than 2-minute test. Not 3 minutes, not 12 minutes. Most tests are more than 15. We need multiple test forms that can be repeated frequently. Screening should be done yearly after age 50, just like a colonoscopy, repeated every 3 months for individuals over 65. And any change over time needs to be detected monthly if there's a concern. Test should be free. Initially, nominal costs through insurance companies would be fine. And we have provided this test, Memtrax.com. The test is based on a continuous performance test, continuous recognition test, shows 50 pictures, set of 3,000 pictures are available, 60 pictures into 50 categories, so we can give always new pictures, or at least in new orders after 100 tests. Pictures are unique, 20 repeated once, 5 repeated twice, so we have a range. The instructions when a picture is seen for the first time, the subject looks at it carefully and tries to remember it. It's only shown for 3 seconds. Subject instructed to respond, pressing a space bar, screen touch. It's programmed in WordPress, so it can be on any platform. It takes 90 seconds for a fast and perfect performance, 150 seconds if you don't respond at all. So it's less than 2 minutes regardless. So online to screen for memory problems, available on any platform, measuring episodic memory, 1 to 2 minutes, repeated often, high test, test consistency, change over time, sensitively detected, capturing the Memtrax captures 64% of the variance, at least as good for in the receiver operator curve for distinguishing normal versus MCI, but with machine learning, we were able to capture more than 90% of the MoCA. And so this is the way it basically goes, is 50 pictures are presented and some pictures are repeated. And when there's a repeated picture, the subject has to push either this space bar or tap the screen as quickly as possible. And this also has been widely used in China. So memtrax.com.cn is also used in China. And here are the means and 2 standard deviations, so we can quickly detect even for one trial whether or not they're in a normal range. And if this was the Brain Health Registry I mentioned before, has had over 100,000 participants take this test, and you can see the distribution of response times here mostly between half a second and say 1.7 seconds. And you can see this distribution extremely interesting in terms of how the brain works, a whole other discussion. And these are the percent correct. So you can get an extremely fast response time and get 50% correct just by pushing it as quickly as you can. But to really do the test right and get a good response time of say 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 seconds, those are the people who are getting high numbers here. And as the percent correct goes down, as they're getting demented here, you can see that their response time also goes down. So this can be a quite sensitive test. Now, comparing this with the MoCA, there's been direct comparisons of Memtrax versus MoCA. This is at least as good as the MoCA, much easier, shorter, repeatable. And with machine learning, we've been able to capture 0.91, which would be 91% of the area of the curve from MoCA. So we're doing very good with respect to that. There's many other tests that are available, but compared to these other tests, we're interested in just the factor that's associated with Alzheimer's disease. All of these are sort of non-specific cognitive tests, but we're trying to get something that's fast, works across platforms, just a precisely episodic memory, and can track the memory performance over time, and manage huge data sets at low cost. So massive internet testing for clinical trials, using a memory test platform here for a health registry, initial tests. This could be easily set up in the recruitment and patient-centric systems that were described earlier today. Initial test demographics can be included, interventions can be tested, and outcome measures can use the Memtrax as an online tool. So what we're going to talk about is we need to control this app switch. So the app switch we think can be controlled by several factors, and these have not really been, everything is in Alzheimer's disease, almost all the tests have been trying to get rid of amyloid, which I just don't think is the right thing. We need to control the amyloid pre-protein and what is making the beta amyloid. The Icelandic mutation works here, and it actually prevents Alzheimer's disease quite completely. And it can inhibit the beta secretase, and leptin can inhibit the beta secretase. The statins can affect the lipid membrane thickness, and leptin can also modulate that, so it can also modulate the gamma secretase cleavage. And stimulating neuroplasticity, leptin has been shown to modify the central neuroplastic mechanisms in lipid configuration. The A-beta deposit removal, antibodies, ligament blockage, no evidence of benefit. And I was just reading a paper about how much of this inflammation of the brain is new aducanumab is causing. The leptin targets the amyloid beta and the tau protein, and the studies that were done in cell culture showing that leptin really does affect the amyloid plaques that are artificially made in the cell culture and the neurofibrillary tangles. The standard clinical trials, and this has already been looked at. Neurotez has presented this to the FDA in discussion interactions. This is phase 1B participants. You have all these outcome measures, metabolic measures. Phase 2, you have to surrogate biomarkers and MRI scans and cognition function. These tests can be very expensive to run one of these clinical trials. But we propose that leptin trial can be used with Mem Trax, both phase 1B and 2B, that patients with late MCI, mild dementia, likely Alzheimer's disease, ApoE positive, 4 positive, or more than 65 years old, that we can test them with Mem Trax, age, MoCA equivalents 15 to 26, so they're mild areas. Two separate studies, males and females. I think they're really important to divide the males and females because their Alzheimer risk and their lipid metabolism risks are so different. Health disparity recruitment, and Alzheimer's disease does seem to disproportionately affect the Black population, and so that needs to be considered as well. a double-blind placebo, 2 doses less than the lipodystrophy dose, for which leptin is already approved, so it's already a approved drug. Phase 1B, 6 arms, 15 subjects in each arm. Phase 2, we have to be determined based on power analysis. The Memtrax administered twice per day for 12 months, so we have 736 tests for each subject, 90 seconds each. It doesn't cost any extra to run this number of tests. There will 5-question query, and I think that you can get subjects, even mild dementia, early cognitive impairment, would be willing to take this test. It's just about as much fun as doing a crossword puzzle or Sudoku. Do it after breakfast and after dinner and before dinner, and we get endpoint analysis at 3, 6, and 12 months. And analysis would be the latest signal detection theory, response time analysis, and use artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually follow what's happening. So this is the scientific advisory board that we have. Dr. Shambo Zhao from China, George Perry is the editor of the Journal of Alzheimer's, Mike Bergeron is our artificial intelligence person, and we have a French guru that we work with also, several people on our advisory board, including Pri Martinez, who is IBM vice president for 32 years, and my son Curtis on the right, and the management team for Neurotez is here, and the board of directors for the program. And how did I do? I think time has been changed on this. Everybody's having these fast presentations. But these are all the partnerships that we have. Stanford, UC San Francisco, Wageningen is a Dutch university we had a very good study with. The Brain Health Registry uses Mem Trax as one of its outcome measures. The University of Kentucky is using it right now for a diversity study. And this is the China group. And that's the French group with Happy Neuron. Civitek Analytics is doing the artificial intelligence and machine learning components. So we've published about, if you look up Memtrax on PubMed, you'll see 8 publications. We have more publications than that, including book chapters that have discussed it, and others that are under submission. And we've had thousands of subjects. We've had probably 2 million subjects that take Memtrax. So we have a very interesting and fun test that I'm hoping is going to expand and really help the field of Alzheimer's disease. So that's what I've got. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to take questions, and the slides are at this website. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting work. It's quite something. For the test itself, you mentioned going from taking it once every 3 months or something to taking it twice a day. Is there any learning effect that you can get by taking it over again, or can you improve, or is that already baked into the analysis?
Well, that's the point of this, is that the actual continual performance task paradigm, and it's used by another researcher at Stanford, where you basically have 50 stimuli and 25 repeated. But the thing is, we have 3,000 different stimuli. So you can't learn the stimuli. Every time you look at one of those pictures, you have to look at it and remember it. And then when it comes up either 5 pictures later or 20 pictures later, you have to have a recognition response and respond. And for totally normal people, it's a fun test, because most normal people miss 1 or 2 during the course of this. And your brain just works this way to see this. But if you've got Alzheimer's disease, the information is not adequately coded. So by having this large number of pictures, we have 5 categories in each test with 5 different images in each category. So there's no way to look at one of these pictures and sort of, say, okay, that's a horse, that's a horse, that's a horse, and remember it that way. You have to look at it. Your basic memory mechanisms that are affected in Alzheimer's disease have to be working for it to work. So there is really no test, retest, recall. It's just like a crossword puzzle. Now, you can get better with crossword puzzles over time. I suppose my mother did these for decades, and she got to a point where she would do them in pen and never make a mistake. So yes, you can sort of train your mind to do this over a long period of time, but basically you're testing the fundamental Alzheimer mechanism. So, test, retest doesn't really work if your memory mechanisms aren't working. So I think that, you can give this few times a day. But the thing, we've had people who have taken this test thousands of times. I think it's about 7 or 8 people have taken it 1,000 times. People like taking it. We have hundreds of people have taken it more than 100 times. So it's, and we followed how they've done over time. And sometimes their percent correct goes up a little bit and their response time goes down a little bit. And I think the machine learning will take care of that to keep them all right in the same proportion of measurement. So that's what we're looking at. So thing is the cost of this versus the cost of a PET scan, which they want to do every 6 months with this aducanumab, which is $5,000. Once this is set up, it's basically a free test. And you can do it. Of course, the analysis is maybe, you have to have some people that can do, the artificial intelligence, machine learning analysis. But yeah, there's nothing that I know of that's anywhere comparable to what I presented to you.
Thank you. It's quite compelling.
So you may have already answered this. I might have missed it, but so when the patients are taking these tests, do they need to have like a physician with them monitoring them while they're taking the test, or are they able to do it completely independently? Because they're Alzheimer's patients. I'm not sure that they, if they have trouble with memory, like, are they going to remember like what they need to do, how to do it, so that they can, if they're going to take it twice a day, are they going to remember to take it twice a day? Do they need to have someone there monitoring them, making sure they're doing it how they're supposed to do it?
Okay, so this is an extremely important question. So the Brain Health Registry, which has used this, has shown that they can get excellent results with unsupervised tests. So if the person remembers to take it, yes, they will take it and do a good job with it. However, the question is, can they remember to take it? And that is, so you either are going to have some sort of partner, which in the Brain Health Registry, they do want a partner that will remind them. But with your iPhones, you should be able to send them a little query twice a day saying it's time to take your test. So there definitely would have to be some additional programming to get this done on a regular basis during a clinical trial. So it's not set up to do the clinical trial yet. This is basically what I've presented to you as a proposal. But if you want to work together, try and get that going with your Clin 360, this would be really a good, fun thing to do.